even if they're not finalized. And a lot of people who are attending the event are either launching or implementing or researching a project, or they've got something they've already implemented and they're worried about or they're concerned about where they're going to have to be in 2 years' time. My name is Jose Garcia. I work for Radency. We're a health tech software development company. As I said before, I'm moderating the event. We're not making a presentation at this event, Radency. We did at the last one. During our last event, we spoke about balancing agile development and compliance, and when building software for healthcare, and we talked about advice on how to collaborate with software developers. If you want that presentation, put a plus sign in the chat, and I'll email you a replay link after this event. The way it's going to work is we're going to spotlight our speakers one at a time, and we'll be asking them questions. And then we're going to be opening it up to the audience. And the Q&A section is going to be a bit more free form. We've actually already got a few Q&A questions. So I've had a lot of people send me questions and topics in advance via DM on LinkedIn. So I've got that. Don't wait. If you've got a question or a topic or a comment, don't wait for the QA to start. Go ahead. Feel free. Just drop it into the chat. Hello, Diane from Netherlands. Feel free to leave a comment in the chat. Let us know where you're calling from, any comments. And I think that's enough preamble. I think everybody should be signed in by now. So maybe we can go. Yeah, okay. We're going to go to our first speaker, Dr. Marian Lempitz. And she is co-founder and CEO of SoftComply. Hello, Marian. Thank you for
Hello, Jose.
coming today. Hi.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us at this event. It's a very hot topic, of course. So I'm Marian, and I started a company called SoftComply about 8 years ago, and the idea is to help medical device developers and medical device manufacturers to get the products on the market faster and affordably. So we create apps to automate quality and risk management on Atlassian Cloud, on Jira and Confluence. And of course, as you know, quality and risk management are not going anywhere, even if we're talking about AI and medical devices. So as I was preparing the kind of little intro of what the medical devices should do in order to have an AI-enabled medical devices on the market, I realized that just two nights ago, the final draft of AI Act was leaked to LinkedIn. And so a lot of things changed a little bit. Unfortunately, medical devices are still high-risk AI systems, and but there are a few things that the new or the final draft of the AI Act might actually help, especially the SMEs and smaller companies. But the goal, as I don't know if you all know, but the Silicon Valley, the kind of the quote has always been that move fast and break things. What we don't want to do is move fast and break people. So the AI Act is there to kind of protect us as the patients and users of AI-enabled or machine learning-enabled medical devices, of course.
Well, healthcare is a bit different. And
indeed.
You correct me if I'm wrong here, but is the medtech, we're going to be talking about healthcare in general, but the people doing medical devices, medtech sector, are they more concerned about?
Oh yeah, of course.
And of course,
I mean, I do think so, because I mean, we just recently had a medical device regulation, a new one in Europe, which made it very, very difficult for notified bodies, first of all, to accredit it, and made it a long queue for them for medical device or to audit the medical devices. now the AI Act will throw another curveball to the notified bodies, because they need to figure out what exactly they need to do to audit the AI-enabled medical devices now, and this will have a lot of they will need a lot of expertise that they might not have today. So it will definitely make it very, very difficult. And of course, the manufacturer's side, I mean, a lot of more documentation. We always say to our clients, who are very often the startups in the medical device space, that just start documenting anything you do, write it down, because that is the goal, to not having to go back once your product is ready and you are ready for the audit. You should document everything. So everything about technical documentation, quality management, and of course the risk management is going to be way more important. So to understand and document how the algorithm works, what training data was used for training the algorithm, for testing the algorithm, everything you need to write down. And the more you have, the better, because the AI Act Article 64 now says that you need to actually give the auditors access to your training data and the testing data, which is of course in a little bit of conflict with data privacy. So because I mean, how, first of all, how do you give external people access to sensitive data? But also it says remote access to your data and algorithm, and in some cases even to source code, which means that the developers would need to also develop an API for the auditors. So this is something that is that needs, of course, hopefully more final guidance of how the auditors expect it to be done. But this will be a huge overhead, and of course for notified bodies or the competent authorities. I mean, how, first of all, they need the expertise to understand this, but also it takes a lot of time to do that. So this is another thing that definitely needs more guidance and clarification from the regulators.
That's a heavy topic. We've got a lot of questions about that. How about medical device manufacturers? How ready should they be to share their AI training data? Should they be doing something in place now? Should they be putting things in place?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the more they have in place, the better for them. I mean, for again, for the technical document, it's not yet completely clear how they are expected to have the data ready, and what data and what access do they need to give that data. But for sure, they would need to do as much documentation as possible. So there are things, there are best practices already in place. If people don't yet know what to do, it's always good to go to FDA, who has a lot of guidance. They all draft at the moment still, but they do go quite technical into what you need to have. So in terms of the training data, you need to for sure do the data labeling. You need to validate your data sources, and you need to have the data curation in place. So so things that you would always expect the data to have, you just, the more you document, the better. But for exact things or best practices, I would suggest for now to go to FDA. FDA has done quite a lot of work to, especially for the continuous learning systems, to help manufacturers understand what needs to be done, and what data can be or should be gathered from them, and especially in the time of audit. So FDA predetermined change control plan guidance is a very good place to start for manufacturers.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Another question I received by DM. And this is specifically for people who are at early proof of concept stage,
Mm-hmm.
moving to validation studies,
Yeah.
and they stress that the race to the finish people overlook this stage and end up having to go backwards and lay
Mm-hmm.
down more solid foundations to get approval. Race to the finish people. I've not heard that expression before. I think that would apply to me, actually. I'm one of those people. But what advice would you give to somebody who is at that very early proof of concept stage
Mm-hmm.
and they're worried about or they're concerned about how to do, I guess, like a compliance roadmap. Do you do compliance roadmaps in medtech too? I guess. How would you handle your regulatory compliance strategy when you're in that
Yeah.
stage?
I mean, as always in any medical device development, you need to kind of first figure out the device, the intended use of the device, and in that, a lot of experts would also suggest to understand where the AI will actually be beneficial. So the AI part of the device itself. So what is the intended use of AI in your device, and how would it help the in general the purpose of your device? And of course, from there on, you need the documentation of all your software development process descriptions, verification, validation processes, the whole quality management system basically, and including the technical documentation about how you train your algorithm, how you test the algorithm, what are the changes allowed for the algorithm to and the limits of these changes actually for the algorithm over time, and the performance, the output of the algorithm. So a lot of kind of information that you need to document to understand that the algorithm is doing what is expected of it, and the quality of the data that you use. Again, I would say that the ideal place to start would be to familiarize oneself with at least the FDA guidance for now, before we have the kind of the guidance or the documents for what the manufacturers are expected to do in terms of complying with the AI Act itself. And I think that's most important. And of course, as part of the quality management system, the risk management itself is very important. So one thing is the development risks that are always there associated with the requirements, the design and the implementation of your system. And the other one, of course, is the risks associated to failure of your device and harming the patient or the user. So these need to be definitely highlighted as well.
Oh wow. Well, Marion, thank you so much for that. I'm gonna
Sure.
move on, and we're gonna come back to you. And I'm going to try and wrap up the first part of the webinar a bit earlier than I was planning, because we're getting a lot of questions in the Q&A. And I think we've got a question about soft comply too, that came into the chat. But I'm going to move on to our second speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marion. We'll bring Marion back in a bit. And our next speaker is Tanya Chib, and she's the privacy and ethics advisor for Therona, and she oversees their governance and privacy. Sorry, their data governance and privacy. And I know you've done a lot of work on compliance and AI already, Tanya.
Yes.
Welcome,
Hi.
by the way.
Thank you, Jose. It's a pleasure to be here. These are exciting times, and this is certainly a hot topic. So thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here with my co-speakers. They're also very knowledgeable on this topic. So personally, just to introduce myself rather quickly, I have now been involved in this field of health tech, from bootstrapped startups who are making health apps to Fortune 500 companies, manufacturing medical devices, and I've been doing this now for 6 years. So this is a topic which is very close to my heart. We've been working on compliance and legal and regulatory for medical devices, and now I work for my clients. So I work for myself, and I work for clients such as Therona, which is making software that are powered by AI for better diagnosis of people with the COPD disease. So this is something it gives me a lot of energy that I'm working in making a direct impact on the quality of life of the people. So great to be here.
Great to have you. I'm going to dive right into our questions. And these are all questions actually I got in it. I just actually received in the last 2 days via DM before the event. And the first one is, what advice would you give to health tech startups deploying AI solutions who are looking to hire a compliance officer? what should they be looking for when they make that hiring choice? And how should they approach the hiring process? This is actually a question from our last webinar. It was a bit out of scope, so we moved it to this one. So this is actually from last year.
Excellent. I would say this is it's an excellent decision to hire a compliance officer. I know many of scale-ups, and not only startups, but they've moved beyond the stage of being a startup, and they're working for a couple of years in the industry, and they missed the step of getting a compliance officer on board. So it's excellent if you're considering this. It means that you will ensure things happen properly right from the start. So if this person, the compliance officer, is going to be someone who is the first person in your legal and compliance team, I would recommend investing in someone with experience and expertise, so a mid to senior level person. From a broad perspective, you're looking for someone who can work autonomously, who is comfortable to draw boundaries, who is comfortable taking calculated risks, and also is good at building relationships within the company. So people are comfortable to approach the officer when they have issues. More concretely, I would say you're looking for the following four qualities. So someone with a proven record of implementing privacy strategies within the company. This is different from somebody who's working in a corporate office somewhere in an ivory tower, and they're used to building guidelines or giving the most ideal, perfect guidelines for people to implement on the workflow. But you actually need somebody who has experience with implementing compliance policies and making the people comply with those policies on the workflow. So there's a difference between that, and I would say go for someone who has that track record, that experience. What is another factor that is really important is to have someone with an outcome mindset. So when you're working in the field of health tech, you're a startup, you're solving complex societal challenges, you are going to run across, you're going to encounter problems which are also unique in their nature from a regulatory and a legal perspective, and you need somebody who is okay with taking an iterative approach, which is it's okay with testing and evolving. So you apply something and you see how it works out. It's more than the one size fits all approach. So you need someone who is a bit more pragmatic, solution oriented, flexible, and experimental. The third factor, which is which is quite important as far as I'm concerned, is good communication skills. So that does not mean that you're comfortable with drawing verbose documents, which are very articulate with complex language, but someone who can speak to people across the board and explain explain complex things in simple languages. So you're able to break down the risk, simplify it, and you're able to show what is a must have and what is a nice to have, and strike a balance between those two because that's going to be needed. And the fourth step, I think, for a startup, especially who's deploying AI, is that you need a person who is proactive. So, a person who's comfortable to take initiative and involve themselves in the different stages of product development, who is comfortable organizing knowledge sessions and training for the staff of the company, who is comfortable to build the weaker links of work on the weaker links in the company on their own accord, because in a startup environment, it's too fast. There's no time for people to really hold your hand. So these four qualities, I'd say, is something that you should really go for in your compliance officer. I hope that helps.
Excellent. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. And I have a couple more questions for you. Based on your experience, this is actually my question. How much clarity or confusion is there in the health tech space about the EU's coming legislation on AI?
There
Is that a
has
big
been a
question?
lot of chatter. Yeah, there's of course, I mean, there's a lot of chatter around this regulation, and rightly so. It's the first of its kind. It's the first time in the world that we're going to be regulating AI, and naturally that comes with a lot of apprehension. We don't really know what to expect. This is a 258-page legislation that also brings more added apprehension. But according to me, that is expected at this stage. I mean, we are still ironing out some of the puzzles of the GDPR. So it goes without saying, there is going to be some unclarity and confusion in the beginning. I've been discussing with my clients, trying to understand how it's going to affect companies who are active in MDR, who are affected by the EU MDR, on harmonization of the new AI Act with the MDR. Will they need to set up 2 risk management and 2 QMS frameworks? Will they have to do double follow-up inspections? And there is a bit of fear of being excessively burdened or over-regulated. We have been speaking about also, on the other hand, like simple apps, which are health apps. Will they now be classified as high-risk applications? And does that mean that even though there is a low risk or a limited amount of risk in the application, but they need to do an excessive compliance? There are some questions, also procedural questions on the assessments, the fundamental right assessment, the conformity assessment. How are these going to be standardized? But at this point, there are all of these open questions, but I've been telling my clients that please expect and embrace uncertainty. The act, once it comes into force, either in Q2 or Q3 later this year, we're going to have a 12 to 24-month transition period. So that should be enough for us to get into a good state to at least start approaching the beginning of the act being in force. And what I do emphasize a lot on is that please, with like the GDPR, this is going to influence the global landscape, the regulatory landscape as far as AI regulation is concerned. So we cannot start early enough. Because there are all of these unclear points and questions, it actually emphasizes the need on rolling up our sleeves and diving deep into where are we at and where do we need to get and what do we know and what do we not know. So indeed, while there is a lot of unclarity, it only emphasizes the need on studying and having conversations such as these even more.
All right. And I'm going to thank you so much, Tanya. We're going to move to
Yeah.
thanks. We're going to bring you back into Q&A in a few minutes. I'm going to move on to Jovan now. I'm trying to
Thank
leave some
you.
time. Oh, thank you so much.
Mhm.
And Jovan is actually, this whole webinar is Jovan's idea, by the way. I did all the work, but his idea. And he suggested it to me last November. Jovan is CEO of Chino.io. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you've probably seen some posts of his that I repost. I like reposting his. And he has some great content on LinkedIn with infographics, and he makes it very simple, especially the GDPR side. It makes it very, very simple. And thank you for coming today, Jovan. Good to see you again.
Thanks for that. Thanks for having me. And it's the second edition of this webinars. Happy to contribute more, to share more knowledge and experience from the startup ecosystem.
Oh yeah, if you want to hear more of Jovan, I mean, he hasn't spoken yet. We have him another webinar, and I posted some clips of him on my LinkedIn in terms of health tech and digital health in general. But we're going to be speaking specifically now about questions regarding AI and compliance. Now, I want to ask you, in terms of your domain, how do you see the AI Act playing out, and what practical steps?
Yeah, no, it's very well. It's the starting point of the discussion. So, well, first of all, on daily basis, we assist hundreds of startups in Europe and US and worldwide, dealing with data protection, privacy data protection requirements from legal and technical point of view. We started as a legal tech company back in 2018, and now we cover both GDPR, legal and technical aspects. So basically how to design, how to build an application, a product, a digital health product, mostly ensuring compliance by design. So what we assist companies is basically passing vendor risk assessments. 99% of our customers are B2B. B2B companies are those facing most strictest challenges in terms of compliance. because they need to demonstrate their compliance to the whole ecosystem in healthcare, which is hospitals, payers, sometimes reimbursement schemes like digital therapeutics, DTX in Germany, in France now also. So we assist those companies to reach the necessary level to ensure this compliance. So how is the AI going to play? Well, reaching this level means, or compliance means, ensuring that you are doing the right thing the right way with the data. And AI is all about mastering data, creating new type of algorithms, new type of knowledge on top of existing data. So getting access to data, as we have seen, ChatGPT, OpenAI, they had the most struggles in the last year are related to how they access the data and how they are collecting new data. For example, the Italian Data Protection Authority blocked ChatGPT at some point. So AI will be basically adding on top of GDPR, on top of all the challenges we had on data, adding new type of requirements, new type of safety, ethical questions, new type of things that companies, startups especially, who will struggle the most, they will need to demonstrate to the data protection authorities or DPOs or entities like BfArM in Germany, where they will be audited to be reimbursed according to the reimbursement schemes. So it's going to add another layer of complexity.
How do you see the adoption? It's interesting, actually. You talk about the data. We're gonna have some more questions about that in the Q&A that I've been receiving. There's a lot of questions about data. But before we get to that, how do you think the adoption process is going to evolve? And it's almost like it's a steady. The data journey is a steady. It's like an onion. You get more and more sophisticated and bigger as you go along. How do you think the adoption process is going to evolve? And what do founders need to be aware of now, even if they're not doing it, even if it is 2 years from now? What do they need to know now?
Yeah, here it's a bit of a disclaimer. It's, as you also mentioned in the beginning, it's a bit of guessing and seeing from the past experiences how this ended up. So in GDPR, we had the 2 years period from 2016 to 2018 where companies had time to adapt. We know that only in May 2018, we started getting emails from companies, everybody freaking out and saying, I updated privacy policy, I'm GDPR compliant now. From what we see in AI Act, it's a bit different because the GDPR framework is already there. We have in every hospital, in every company, larger company, to whom startups want to sell, there are already DPOs. There are already those bad guys, very conservative, but that's their job. They need to audit you. And AI Act, from the beginning, it raised a lot of attention, a lot of interest in media. We are here with a lot of participants that sign up to this webinar for a reason. So my belief is that the AI Act will be, we're not going to wait for 2 years for these entities like DPOs and companies asking to their clients, startups, to prove compliance about AI Act. So my feeling is that this is AI Act, contrary to GDPR, is going to be demanded from day zero. And since GDPR, for example, already provides touch points for AI, there is Article 22 about automated decision-making and profiling, which is basically AI. So the new requirements introduced by AI are going to squeeze in there, and DPOs, their role is about GDPR. It's about asking you tough questions about your GDPR practices. They're just going to ask more and more of those questions that are in AI right away, right from the day zero, auditing companies. So
that makes sense.
There will be a lot of chaos. There will be a lot of rush to analyze what really the text suggests, create knowledge on that, because we don't have yet the framework, the policies, the way to audit, the way to structure the knowledge about demonstrating compliance. But that's going to happen, in my opinion, much faster than compared to GDPR.
I agree. But when the GDPR came in, and this I'm just talking about Twitter. GDPR came in. You didn't get any viral posts about GDPR violations in 2018. It was several years later that you'd get these viral posts about, oh, this company is violating GDPR, or they might be. The EU Act, they haven't even, it's the ink's not even dry, and it's already, people are already kicking off on Twitter, spotlighting companies, saying, and they're doing prompt engineering hacks. So they're not going to get that grace period. They're not going to get that grace period. And
yeah, so it's like 2 years and a half less time basically compared to GDPR, because if GDPR was approved in 2016, so we didn't have any kind of discussion, bigger discussion until 2018. Now we are here discussing what will be the impacts on everyone. Yeah.
I got one last question for you. This is going to be a bit more specific before we go to the Q&A. And the reason why I'm asking you this is we have a lot of people here who are from image analysis, early diagnostics. So a lot of them are radiology, cardiology, early detection of Alzheimer's. There's one company that is analyzing depression by facial expressions while you're playing games and things like that. Do you have any specific advice for people? Now, some of these people are actually these range people for just very early stage starting out. Some of them actually been around for like a couple of years now, still early.
Yeah.
Is there any specific advice you give to that particular kind of niche of use cases using AI for image analysis?
Yeah, so I think it's going to really depend from use case to use case, and specifically from the sector, subsector in which these companies operate. The image analysis, for example, is one of the most famous examples and most common examples of AI adoption and machine learning adoption, because companies are really able to provide improvement to doctors in specific scenarios evaluating X-rays or EKGs. This happened since 2015, I think, when I started dealing in the startup space, working in startup space, I saw the first examples of those kind of solutions. So 10 years ago or so. They will have the easiest life in terms of demonstrating their AI, because it's an AI applied to a specific case in a lab, in a hospital setting, where there will be doctors using this and controlling the effects, controlling the risks. So it's a very controlled, very defined environment. For them, the challenge is how to access to the data. That's how do you work with hospitals, with clinical settings, to access to existing retrospective data sets with legal obligations, with limitations, consents that you don't have. But that's another topic. That's a GDPR related topic, pretty much. Companies that are building DTX solutions, digital therapeutics, on the other side, that are going to apply for reimbursement at national level. So they are almost B2C. They will apply AI to generic public. They will be prescribed by doctors, but they will basically be a lot B2C. They are very, very in contact with the patients, but they need to be approved by national institutions. That's going to be the most challenging aspect. So, for example, catching depression with AI from some tests that you can do on the phone or the computer, that's going to be really borderline in terms of risks, in terms of who is going to audit, who is going to control, and how you really document that you are not doing anything weird with the data, but you're having everything under control. So it's really going to be depending on the use cases.
Thank you, Jovan. I think we're going to move to the Q&A now. And because we've got a lot of questions, and we're going to keep Jovan. We're not getting rid of him. He's staying. We're bringing in Tanya and Marion. And I've got a lot of questions about the data. And let's see, I think the topic of data management, and one question I've got here is, people are concerned, very early stage, is how do I collect, store, and train a model and still be compliant. And so they haven't launched yet. There's actually a lot of people who haven't actually launched yet, but they're at the idea stage. What advice would you have to somebody who hasn't even started to train? Because they're training their model. It might take a while to train their model, and they're going to be audited in the future. What should we be looking at now? What should we be thinking about? Can we start with Chanya and get everyone else, and then we'll move on to the other two speakers? Do you feel what advice, Tanya, would you give to somebody who's about to train?
I think it's again excellent stage to ask this question, because here you can actually apply the principles of privacy by design, which is that you should start at the outset of before you start collecting data, you think about all of these aspects. Usually the people I work with have trained their model, and then we say, oh, are we on the right track? So if you have not collected your data, you haven't started training, excellent. This is where we have the time and space to think about the legal basis. So what is going to be the legal basis of the data you collect? Are you going to rely on explicit consent? Ideally, are you going to be relying on legitimate basis? How are you going to be relying on research? What is going to be your exception under the GDPR? What's going to be your legal basis? So that's something that you should be extremely clear on. Another factor that we want to really make sure is that we are following with the principles of GDPR, which is transparency to the data subject. So we are informing in case you have collected the data from a hospital, like Johan was mentioning, and this data you're going to use to train your algorithm. And this has not been, say, for example, was collected in the course of providing medical services to the data subjects, but later on, this data is going to be used for building an AI. Are you going to work with the data as it is, or are you going to anonymize the data before, if that is possible for you, and that is also still useful for you after you train, and you can also your algorithm can work with anonymous data, please do that. If that's not an option for you, then how are you going to go back to the data subjects and inform them? So these are things that you need to consider. So complying with the principle of transparency. And then the second thing is to work with the principle of data minimization. That is to ensure that you're only working with the amount of data that you really need. I know as developers, as engineers, AI engineers, they're always hungry and greedy for more data. But let's try and take up the challenge and see what we can do with really the minimum data that we need. And so that is quite important. And then is to document everything that we've been working with so far. That I cannot repeat that enough. Especially now with the AI Act, we really want to be very clear on what was our training data, what was our validation data, testing data, and maintain clear records. Of course, please can get an expert on board to help you do a privacy impact assessment. So you can do that at the outset. You can see what are the risks that are inherent or the potential privacy risks in your AI model. And you can then accordingly put in controls and safeguards to mitigate that risk. So those are some of the things that come to my mind. We can obviously go into deeper. I don't know if some of my...
Can I ask you a quick question, follow-up to what you just said?
Yeah.
What kind of best practices would you advise someone say, okay, I want to document everything? How can you give them a couple of best practices about documentation?
That's an interesting. It really depends from company to company. I've been working with a lot of softwares which like in each stage of the product development to work with. So we've been also working with Jira and Confluence. It really helps to have a software that you're working on where you can make sure that each of these decisions, especially around privacy, you have either a privacy officer or somebody who's managing, at least from a privacy perspective, and later on also from the AI and then EU MDR perspective, that you have someone in charge who is keeping. It's hard to say. It's hard to say how to do it, but there has to be some kind of structure, some kind of framework within the company. Whether it's that you use a software, whether it is that you do it it's more broken down how you do it. But I frankly personally have been preferencing using software so that it is all aligned, different stages of the product development. What were the decisions that were taken? Why did we take this decision? Who has taken the decision? And then it's all just put together and it's kept there for at least until even after the post-market surveillance requirements.
Thanks for that, Tanya. Marion, did you want to add something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tanya said it very, very nicely. I just want to add something. You said privacy by design. In our medical device world, it's also safety by design. So I want to kind of highlight that it has to be safe for the patients and the users as well. And in terms of the data, the quality is more important than quantity. Again, something Tanya said, you need to make sure that the data that you train your algorithm with is quality data, that you can prove that it is relevant to what your AI algorithm is intended to do. So the entire intended purpose for what is very, very common in medical devices is very important here also for the AI algorithm inside your medical device or of the medical device itself. So what is it supposed to do, and what are all the foreseeable risks that you can imagine that could happen to the patient, and how you would mitigate them? So these are really, really important. Again, I couldn't stress more the importance of risk management here, that needs to be, again, documented and completed before you can you can have the auditors, visit you.
Thanks for that, Marion. Do you want to add something, Jovan?
Yeah, sure. So I always try to suggest also companies, I mean, totally agree here on documenting everything from privacy by design and also on risk management. I always point the fact also what companies will need to demonstrate is the compliance to data protection officers, and frequently they're asked to provide a DPIA, data protection impact assessment, or risk assessment, whether they're B2C or B2B. So to document everything on what they're doing on data protection compliance in a way that can be audited by a third party. And for that, we at Chino.io also offer now a solution for documenting and automating this process and printing out the risk assessments on data protection, not on MDR, and also providing some free templates if that's interest. I see some questions on this topic, so there are potentially also some free templates that companies can use. Reach out if you need them.
And I think we're going to run out of time. We've got 15 minutes left. I've still got a couple of questions. Marion, I'm going to ask you a question. I'll put this to
Go
you.
ahead.
Someone asked me, can you talk about gray zones between, the EU has risk categories. Are there gray zones between the risk categories? And if so, what do the gray zones mean? And can you talk about that? How would people navigate those spaces if they exist?
Yeah. I think there are two things. One is MDR, and the other one is AI Act and its impact on the risk classification. And as you of course know, AI Act is not final yet, but it looks like everything to do with or the kind of AI systems that are affecting or predicting the health of a person will be categorized as high risk AI systems. So what exactly does that mean in addition to what let's say a risk class 2A medical device needs to put in place and needs to be audited on is not yet completely clear. But it will definitely be about safety, and it will be about the documenting and the data of training and testing the algorithms. So there will probably be more to what we are doing at the moment. And adding to what we said before, like the different medical devices that are on the market, a lot of them have locked algorithms. They're not continuously learning systems yet. And what does that mean to have a continuously learning system in terms of the regulation and requirements? Again, in EU is again unsure. In US, the FDA, like I mentioned, the predetermined change control plan has that kind of figured out. It's still a draft, but it has a very good technical base where to start from. But yeah, what that exactly means, I think we are all waiting for, once the voting has been done in February the 2nd, and the final text will be available hopefully by Q3 probably this year to understand. And of course, then we need still some guidance to understand what the notified bodies, the competent authorities will expect from the manufacturers.
Okay, I've got one question. I've got one question. I'm going to try and roll into two because we got two questions, and I've got one here in the chat, and it's actually very similar to one I've received earlier about generative AI. And this is a question I'm going to read it out for the chat. I have seen a health app for the general population on using blood glucose monitoring for weight loss. They seem to use AI to provide comments on the diet, which are potentially dangerous without health professional context. And this is a question I'm hearing as well: generative AI and compliance. How will this sort of situation be considered under the EU's new AI Act? So, medical advice from generative AI or comments. I'm gonna give this to Jovan, and then we'll go out to the rest of the panel.
Yeah. So, well, I think it's a tough question who should intervene here, whether which authority should intervene, but somehow it's not really an AI related question here. Probably the new AI authority will have some powers also to intervene in this space, but it's not really an AI related somehow problem. It's more or on a medical risk problem, and here more to Marion and the context of certification, risk management, and how B2C potentially, in this case it looks like it's a B2C application, how those B2C apps that exist since ages and then they are not certified perhaps, or probably not certified anything like CE marking in class 2 and class 1, 2A or 2B, etc. So who's going to catch them? Who's going to audit them? Probably nobody. So that because they are going to live on marketplaces. B2C in general, it's a bit wilder space in also from data protection point of view, because there is not much audit, there is not much scrutiny on those applications. For example, to publish on the App Store, Google App Store, you just need to provide a rough privacy policy, but that's quite easy. So nobody's really auditing them. So there are projects, for example, at European Union level on creating labels for medical products, like the ones for, in addition to CE marking, but also the similar to the electronics devices for labeling the single apps with all the different elements like data protection, medical grade certification, proven data, and so on. But this is really far away from being practical. So for now, I think it's a wild west in B2C space.
Does anybody else want to comment? Add anything that we've got some more questions?
I could comment. I just add on to Jovan's answer that it's you are spot on there, that there is a difference between a well-being and a medical device. So well-being app and a medical app. But if it is a high-risk system, so we have a second question about the chronic diseases. The high-risk AI systems will require by AI Act a human oversight, which is another big conundrum, because who is going to evaluate what the AI-enabled medical device, for example, will say? So where do we get the expertise, the time? So AI systems are usually very fast, like somebody to go and evaluate the answer. This is going to be a huge point in the AI Act, and to understand how exactly the regulators expect manufacturers to do that is still unclear. For at least, I think it is a very, very big question. So a really good question from the audience.
I got a follow-up question, and maybe we could give this to Tanya. I don't know if what happens? Same question. What happens if it's a digital therapeutic for chronic diseases. Does that change the compliance picture? Do different rules apply?
Interesting. So I would have to understand a bit more about the use case, but again, I would have to see if this is governed. This is firstly considered. So there will be essentially under the AI Act, we need to answer two questions. First question, is there an artificial intelligence being deployed, a solution, AI solution being deployed? If yes, then we see whether it falls under one of the high risk systems, the high risk classified systems. If this is a digital therapeutic for chronic diseases, I have a feeling that because of the way the act is, at least it reads now, it would. And then we would have to comply with the number of obligations for the high risk. So this is also actually something which I also mentioned earlier, where maybe a low risk or a limited risk app might end up being over-regulated, because then they need to comply with the reporting requirements to the consumers. There's the record keeping, as we discussed, there's all the technical documentation, there is human oversight, ensuring your security, accuracy, robustness. It would then might end up for an application which is only a therapeutic, will fall under the AI Act, and it will. That's also another conundrum of the act, that we might be bordering on over-regulation here.
I know it's going to be a big category. Generative AI used in diet management and prevention, managing diabetes.
If I can add here,
go
Jose.
ahead.
Yeah, just a topic to add on that, which is specifically for DTX reimbursement schemes, because digital therapeutics, as we know, can live in a B2C space, as we mentioned also before, but typically they are built for being reimbursed in Germany with the DVG, the DVG, DIGA law, or PECAN in France, or UK DTAC, or now discussing in Spain, in Italy, in US, in Belgium, refinement. So those processes have a gatekeeper, which is a national entity for pharmacovigilance for approving drugs. They will approve those digital therapeutics applications, do most of, the hardest scrutiny on digital health, on medtech innovations happen in those instances, because, for example, in Germany, if you want to be reimbursed, you need to have ISO 27001. From August, you will need to have also GDPR certification. We still try to figure out who is going to audit that and according to which schemes, but you need to have pen test from an accredited, from a good company. There are also requirements on that. Of course, you need to have MDR certification, typically class 2A, but also here there is a bit cloudy. So the introduction of additional AI requirements will be, my feeling here also, is going to be applied immediately by those entities. They're going to embed those requirements into the approval process. So startups will need to prove their compliance with this AI Act provisions in the next months from the text being published.
I think it's still attractive for a lot of people to go through those hurdles. It weeds out the competition, and they're getting good revenue, from what I've heard from the digital therapeutics. I'm going to try. We've got 5 minutes. I think we got time for one more question. How comfortable are regulators with complex models, generative AI, where it's almost impossible to understand how the model comes up with its solution? We've got 5 minutes. So maybe everyone could do a very quick round robin. Tanya, you can go first. I know this is a big one.
Yes, no, this is definitely a big one. How comfortable are we're all still figuring generative AI, including the regulators. This is really, let's be honest, we don't have an idea of how this will be approached by supervisory authorities. For anyone who is functioning in this field, again, I would advise that caution is the way to go. Take a conservative approach over here. Make sure you are crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's over here. in case you are functioning in this field, because there is, from at least my experience so far, I have seen that there is a larger scrutiny on such. And as we have seen from the past with ChatGPT, there is a larger scrutiny on such models, especially under health tech, dealing with sensitive data. I feel it would be better to err on the side of caution if you are playing in this field. But of course, we can dive deeper into the discussion please feel free to reach out if I understand better of what exactly is the model, what's the use case. But I would take a conservative approach in this case, even though there is not a lot of knowledge and understanding, but I sense that there will be a higher scrutiny.
Anything you want to add, Marian? Keep in mind,
Sure.
you'll have 90 seconds.
All right, I'll be very quick. So the new text of the AI Act draft actually talks about it, and they try to oversee the generative AI used in the high risk systems or in the prohibited, which is the kind of the other area that they target. And in there, they want to understand why, first of all, they need it. So that on top of everything that Tanya said, I think that's very, very important to you to make sure that there is a reason why you need to do it and how it helps the general purpose of your device. So definitely do the documenting bit.
Okay, Jovan.
Yeah.
Last minute.
My suggestion to anyone trying to attempt to create something such big is to use Azure and OpenAI installed on Azure. There is an instance where you don't really have any data protection issues, and OpenAI and Azure are the same, Microsoft are the same thing right now. So they will provide you the conformity assessment documentation that you will need. So you will just embed that in your application, and you will going to solve data protection and compliance requirements issues, so you can go ahead much faster. If you try to build something such complex, well, hire lawyers. You have here a couple of great examples, and hire also medical experts. You will need money anyway to hire all your compliance team. So I think it's going to be the least problem.
Okay, we've just had a bunch of people just join. It might be very confusing. We're all just saying goodbye now. I want to thank everybody for coming in. We've got some more questions, and actually, about the use of data, we don't have time to cover them. So I'm going to get back to some people. We've got ideas for a future webinar. Thank you, Jovan. Thank you for coming up with this idea. It's really popular. He came up with the idea. I just do all the work. Tanya, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jose.
And thank you so much, Marian.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And by the way, if anybody wants to register for our next webinar, I've done something cheeky. When it goes to the survey at the end of this talk, if you hit the big blue button, it'll take you to the registration page. My next webinar is going to be in next week. It's on building digital products, lessons from the game industry. I'll be actually talking a little bit in this one because I'm also a game developer. What can you learn from game design, and how can you apply that to improve your user experience and your adoption rates for your own digital products? I'm not talking about just gamification, bells and whistles, but design practices. And that's it from us. Thank you so much for everybody signing in. We are out of time. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
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 And